My name is Frank Fontaine.
Frank, you were an artist initially in your artistic career, is that correct?
It all came together. Acting and painting and everything else, yes, sort of started very, very young.
What was your discipline in terms of painting?
Oh, I like to work with oils, and I don't like to belong to any particular school or what have you. You know, I just do what comes into my mind. My favorite painter, well, I should say artist because he was more than the painter, would be Pablo Picasso. You know, simply because there was no limit. He did everything. So if you don't like one thing, there's something else you can like, and so on.
I just saw an extraordinary exhibition of his work in Toronto at the Art Gallery of Ontario, and it is mind-blowing, the breadth of his vision.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing. Yeah. From the very early stuff, and his work with sculpture. I mean, he did everything.
He did everything.
Why did you become an artist, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. It just came out of me. What can I say, you know? And why did I become an actor? All I can tell you is I always did it. And I did go to Georgetown University in Washington, did my best to be a good student in social studies, but it simply was not for me. After a while, I inquired where was the best place to train to become a professional actor. This goes back a long time ago, very long. And the fellow who was in charge of the drama department at Georgetown spoke to me about the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. And at that time, the Canada Council didn't exist, and there were no scholarships or anything. And I just sold everything I had, bought a ticket for the ship United States, and arrived in London with $35 in my pocket, and with the idea that I was going to wind up in RADA, win a scholarship, and, you know, everything would be perfect. And believe it or not, that's exactly what happened. I got a job as soon as I got there. I had to, at a store, a furniture store, which at the time was the biggest in London, Waring and Gillow. And I remember, as if it were yesterday, when I walked into the employment office, which was completely bare. There was just a guy sitting there, and when he saw me walk in, I was 18 years old at the time. It was like, you know, the savior or somebody like that had walked into his office, and he started to ask me questions, and he said, "Would you like to be an assistant buyer at Waring and Gillow?" And he explained to me what Waring and Gillow was, and I said, "Well, I know nothing about furniture, and you know, I've got no training of any kind for business." He said, "Don't worry about it." At that time, you see, there was a great shortage of manpower in England. So I got a job right away, and then I went to RADA and got the information, and I thought my Shakespeare was very good because I had to do an audition. But what got me in, as I was to find out later, was something I did from Golden Boy. And as for my Shakespeare, I was told that the panel, which determined all, you know, who got in and who got what in the way of scholarships and so on, had to bite their lips to avoid laughing. So, you know, that was, yeah.
So what year would that have been, Frank?
That would be 1955.
Wow, you look younger than you probably are.
Well, thank you.
So 55, you went into RADA.
Yeah.
And that was a 2-year program?
2 years at the time. Now it's 3, but it was 2 in my time.
And who were your teachers there?
Well, the most memorable teacher, there was Miss Jick, who was on the panel and is the one who told me about my Shakespeare performance. You know, she later had me do Romeo and Juliet, and I kind of learned, you know. But I would say the teacher who had the most influence on me, and as far as I know, pretty well most actors who ever had the privilege of studying with him, was a fellow by the name of Peter Barkworth. And he came to RADA at the request of the principal, John Fernald, and he had no thoughts about teaching. He was a young actor in the West End, and I guess Mr. Fernald liked him and asked him to come and give a course. And he walked into, I was in the first class that he ever taught, and he was very apologetic when he walked in, saying, very frankly, I've never done this before. I have no idea exactly where I'm going. We're going to learn together. And learn we did. It was extraordinary, you know, because when you're with somebody who's himself looking to learn, I don't know, something happens, you know. He never pretended like he knew it all. Of course he passed on some stuff that we didn't know, but it just like came out, you know. It was like at our speed, and maybe that made him particularly tolerant. I'll never know. But he's written books, and I've spoken to other actors who had the privilege of working with him, and they all said Peter Barkworth was the man.
Mm-hmm. So obviously he is the most significant person in your early career as an actor.
In my early, yeah.
So what happened after you graduated from RADA?
First of all, I did do some work at the Great Yarmouth Rep Theatre while I was there, and I also worked as a stagehand while a student at RADA at the Arts Theatre Club. And I'll tell you an anecdote about that. It's very funny. Well, I think so. We were doing a Victorian mystery, and the type of play, the director seriously had an idea of having 2 or 3 people at the back of the theater yelling, because in those days they used to yell, "Behind you," or "Watch out, he's coming," you know, that you'd get that from the audience because they were so involved. And it was that type of play. And the guy, it was a detective story with Simon Legree. And Simon Legree was played by a fellow by the name of George Coulouris, who was in films everywhere in England and Hollywood. And the only way from one side of the stage to the other would be, you had to go, at least for that particular play, you had to walk underneath the stage, which is where we used to hang out, the stage hands, when we were not needed. And so one night, George, who, by the way, was a very, very professional actor, but he usually had maybe a glass or 2 of wine before. That was British tradition, you know. But he was always all right. So anyway, so George comes across one night and says hi, as he always did, and then takes out, the play's going on, and takes out a couple of 8 by 11 pictures of himself, with his arms around Khrushchev and Bulganin, who happened to be visiting London at the time. They were the heads of the Russian government, you know, and in those days, it wasn't like today. I mean, these people never left their country, and they didn't go into places like London. Everybody was out in London, tried to see them. And here's George with his arms around the two, and he's showing these pictures to us, you know, with a great big grin on his face. And we're really impressed. And then it turns out that he'd spent the day shooting a film at Madame Tussauds. wax figures.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So you worked your way through school, and you how did the furniture buying gig?
Oh, that as soon as I did get the scholarship at RADA, and so that it disappeared quickly. I was completely focused on acting, and the work that I did whenever I did do some was theater oriented, such as working as a stagehand at the Arts Theatre Club.
And so, when after your acting experiences as Yarmouth, where did that take you?
Oh, well, then some people from the National Film Board came over and did a film on a Canadian girl and me as student at RADA, and they had insisted that I should hurry back to Canada, that there was tons of work. And so I came back only to discover that there wasn't tons of work, you know. So I drifted a lot into television, but you know, I continued on with stage work, and then being in television and having a rather steady income. I got married, had children, but as soon as my children were old enough, I got them together, and I said, Daddy now wants to go back to the stage. I'm dropping this the show that I'm doing on television, and I said, you know, you realize, guys, that you may not quite have as much money coming to you as you do now. I had a good income, but I didn't know what the heck was going to happen afterwards. So they said, go ahead, don't worry about us. And the rest, as they say, is history.
When would this have been, Frank?
That would have been the switch over when I went into television as a young actor, and because I thought that would be an opportunity to make ends meet, you know. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, what they asked me to do seemed to work out pretty good, and so I stayed around for quite a while, and I still do television, but in a different context, you know, strictly as an actor and not as a on-camera personality, if you wish.
So you were an interviewer?
Yeah, all that sort of thing, you know.
And this was for the Radio Canada or CBC?
Well, it was for CBC. It was a station affiliated with CBC, the first independent station in Quebec City, affiliated with the CBC and also with Radio Canada. I started in English, but something happened to somebody at one point on the French side, and they asked me if I would pitch in, and so I did, and I had a rather strong accent, but people in Quebec City are different perhaps from elsewhere, and they seem to enjoy hearing the accent. They used to tell me, you know, oh, we just love your accent. And of course I was desperately trying to eliminate the darn accent, and they thought they were being very nice, and they were, but it was the last thing I want to hear, you know.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Eastern Townships and here in Montreal.
Right. Where in the Eastern Townships?
Well, where I live now, it was then called West Shefford. Now it's called Bromont.
Right. So when you went back to the theater, once your kids had grown up, what did you do?
God, I did all kinds of stuff. You know, it really rolled, and I drifted very quickly into, well, I met Denis Arcand at a party, and he was about to start shooting a movie, which is in French, Le Crime David Plouffe, and in English, A Crime in the Family, which worked very well. Mm-hmm. And at that time, we got into a long conversation, and I was really not trying to push myself as an actor. It was the last thing I was thinking of. I was more interested in finding out about the movie business. I was like, really keen on everything. And that was that. The party finished. I went home. And a few weeks later, I get a phone call from a production assistant saying that he wanted to cast me as the cop, the detective in that movie. And of course, I hadn't read the script. I didn't know what kind of a part it would be, but it worked out very well, And then I got creative and suggested that there was a particular scene to make the script work better that he ought to add. Without going into details, because I wasn't qualified to do that, but I gave him the idea, and he went for it right away. So all I was looking for was to stretch out my working days, That's all I cared about, and I was looking for all kinds of angles. One of them worked.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And did you do live theater as well?
Oh yeah. Yes, I've always, wherever the call has come from, I've gone.
Can you share with us like what some of your favorite roles have been?
On stage?
Yeah. Besides Romeo.
Well, no, that would be one. No, I prefer. I did not so long ago. The Fantasticks, which was directed by Douglas Campbell, the late Douglas Campbell, who was a great fellow.
Yes.
And I played Henry, the old actor.
I love that role. Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. And I enjoyed Douglas Campbell an awful lot.
Great man.
Because I got a lot from him, because obviously if he had been acting in the play, that's the part he would have played. And I didn't mind at all that, he was sort of playing it through me.
Right.
That was okay, because there was a lot of generosity and nothing. He allowed me to go where I wanted to go. He just helped me along. He didn't impose anything.
He was a very generous guy.
I got to tell you a little something.
Okay.
By then he had bad knees. He could hardly walk anymore. And there's the two fathers who are rather young men, in the Fantasticks, well, fairly young. They have to dance, and a buck and what do you call it? It's a buck and something dance, and
win?
hey, yeah,
Buck and win?
buck and win, yeah. So they were doing all right, but he didn't like the way they were doing it, and this man can hardly walk, can hardly stand up, and he says, "All right, I'll show you how it's done," and he manages to get up off his chair, and all of a sudden he's dancing like he's 20 years old. The stage will do that to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I played Prince Hal in Henry IV Part 1 at Stratford, and he was Falstaff. And his own son, one of his sons, was in the company. Well, actually, two of his sons, Torquil, who's now in the band Stars here, and Ben were both in the company. He was so generous to me. He treated me like his son, He was a really great guy. I loved him very much.
Yeah.
Good socialist, man. So was this at the Piggery?
Yes, it was at the Piggery.
And Moira was around?
Yes, because she directed for that season. She directed Twelfth Night, in which I played Malvolio and enjoyed it an awful lot. I enjoyed her directing because she would get ideas, and she didn't necessarily look for logic in her ideas, and I like that. If an idea comes to you, give it a shot. Whether it makes sense or not, doesn't matter. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And so she was a free spirit that way. I enjoyed that very much.
What other roles have been fantastic